Good morning, everyone. Hope everybody's having a great day so far. What do I have today? I have a GMC Isuzu. I have a GMC version of an Isuzu. Let me show you what I got. It's this truck right here, the flip cab, and this one is a GMC, and it has a 6-liter in it. Same 6-liter you'd get in any of the pickup trucks and vans and stuff like that. Now the problem with this one is, and I've dealt with this before on this truck, originally his complaint was in regards to hard starting, and it had throttle body codes. So I checked it and I said, none of the codes are a current condition of the vehicle. It's all history type codes, and I can't duplicate the problem. So the owner of the company, he knows some stuff about vehicles. He's not a mechanic himself, but he knows enough. So he said, well, what do you think about replacing the throttle body? I said, I can if you want me to. I can't guarantee it's going to fix anything, because it's a lot of throttle body codes. So he had me put a throttle body in it, and it didn't fix it. So he's been driving it for a while, trying to figure out what's going on and when he's got an issue. And he's narrowed it down to, when it rains, usually it has to be a heavy rain, all of a sudden the thing won't start. He says as soon as it dries up, it starts right up. He says when they get it back, he's a landscape professional, and what happens is he'll take it out on certain landscaping jobs, and the truck will get all muddy because they do a lot of new constructions and stuff like that. The truck will get all muddy, so they'll get it back. And they actually power wash the thing to get all the mud and dirt off of it. So I mean, if you look, the truck is pretty clean for what it is. Here it is. I mean, it's a pretty clean truck. And you can see I've already done a throttle body on it. So when they power wash it, he said it won't start. Okay. So obviously we're dealing with a water issue, a water into a connector, something along those lines. But right now, it's starting fine. So where do I start? Basically, in a situation like that, whenever I have something like that, what I'm going to start doing is I'm going to start checking grounds. I'm going to start checking all connectors that I can run into. Like, you have a coil pack on one with a connector right there. You got the same thing on the other side. You have a main harness that runs down, and I'm not exactly sure where it goes. I'm going to have to look and see. There might be a computer mounted underneath there somewhere. I don't know. I would imagine there is. So I'm going to have to go and check all of that stuff. I'm going to take everything apart, and I'm going to look at everything. So that's what I'm going to get into right now. I'm going to start taking stuff apart. I'm going to start checking grounds. One thing I have found in the past, and not on this particular vehicle, but on other V8s, the 4.8, 5.3, 6.0, 6.2, and I've seen it a couple times. There's a ground on the driver's side of the block that's down low, right behind the power steering pump. I have seen that become loose, and it'll set all sorts of weird codes. This one isn't setting those codes, but that one is also like a main ground. So I'm going to check that. It's actually located right down in this area. I'm not quite sure if we could see it. It usually, you see that boss that's right there on the block? It usually goes there on the pickup trucks. So I'm not quite sure where it would be on this truck. So let me go ahead and let me start checking everything and see if I can find something. And hopefully I can find something and I can show you what I find. All right, let me go ahead and do that and we'll go from there. All right. One thing I do recall when I changed the throttle body, like I said, this is a few months back, is I noticed this. That connector. You know what that connector is? That's a replacement connector. See how all the wires are white? So up here you see it's kind of bulged out. Somebody else had put this on, and basically what I did was I opened up the harness here and I inspected the connections because I wanted to make sure the connections were good. And they were good from what I could tell. So, but now, since we have the same issue happening again, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to open it back up again and I'm going to recheck what I had already checked before. Because either, like I said, I got a bad ground, a bad connection somewhere that's getting water in it, something along those lines, or I have a sensor or something that gets a 5-volt reference that might be taken out a 5-volt reference line. However, in a situation like that, usually you would get codes for it. I haven't scanned it for codes yet, but that's actually my next step. I got to check this thing for codes and find out what's going on. See what's actually in there. I don't recall what was in there the last time. I'm not sure if we recorded what was in there the last time. So All right, let me go from there. And I did only find, it's got one main ground from the block to the frame, and then there's the harness ground. I only found one of them that's basically going to, actually I'm sorry, there's two of them that are going to the back of the block from the harness. So, but I'm really not seeing anything. Let's see, yeah, there's nothing actually that I'm seeing that that's throwing up any red flags, not as of yet. So let me keep going with this. All right, so what I did just do was I actually spoke to the guy who drives this truck most often instead of speaking to the owner. And the guy who drives it says, no, it never dies and it never not starts. What happens is it all of a sudden has no throttle. Again, there we go to the throttle body. So he says he could be driving it and all of a sudden completely lose throttle. The pedal will do absolutely nothing. Okay. He says after they power wash it, go to start it, has no throttle. It'll start, just have no throttle. Shut it back off, wait a little while, try it again, all of a sudden it'll have throttle. Okay. So now I scanned it for codes, and as you see here, oops, let me shut this off. It has a bunch of throttle position, TP or APP sensor one problem. We have low activity for bank 1 and bank 2 O2 sensors, which is kind of an odd code. So I have to look into that. TP or APP sensor 2, misfire detected. That could be, who knows? I mean, if this thing has a wiring issue, which is what I think it has, that can explain the low activity on the O2s, which could cause the thing to have a misfire because it could be running lean, could be running rich, who the heck knows. Electric throttle module versus throttle model, maybe, I don't even know what that stands for. I gotta look it up. Each manufacturer is different, that's why I never know exactly what it's talking about. Versus throttle position performance, basically what it's supposed to be and what's actually happening are two different things. And on to page 2. See that? Lost communication with throttle actuator. So we've got a bad connection somewhere. So I'm going to have to start tracing into this harness. We got a bad connection somewhere, bad wire somewhere. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look where somebody had replaced that connector end, and I'm going to look there to see what I see, if I see anything. I may have even redone it. I don't know. I won't know till I open it up. So, all right, let me go there and see what we find. So one thing I decided to check real quick was the PCM connectors, since they're right here underneath the dash. Also, they did inform me that they have on occasion hosed out the interior. So I was just thinking, yeah, just in case, maybe there's water in the connectors, but I don't find anything. Everything looks pretty good. And if you look down in here, everything looks fine. There's nothing that I can see of any concern on either one of these two. So I'm not going to go through a pin drag test or anything else like that. But like I said, everything goes through the C1 connector for both, for everything basically, for the sensors and the throttle body. I figure it's always worth a shot giving a look at that. And like I said, I wanted to check all the connectors regardless. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to double check everything with that throttle body just to make sure, and then I'm going to probably start opening up the harness a bit and see what I can see. I thought I had checked this connector originally when we first put the throttle body on, not the connector, but the repair that was done by somebody else. But I guess I didn't, and I'm not quite sure why. Maybe I didn't actually put the throttle body on. I don't recall, honestly. I work on quite a few things, so who knows? Somebody else could have thrown the throttle body on. I just assumed I looked at it. But check this out. I want to show you something. And this is why I don't like these connectors. A lot of people use these heat shrink type connectors, and there's a reason I don't like them. I'm going to show you here. Let's see if I can find it. If you look closely, what do you see there? It ripped right where the crimp was. It's pierced. It's pierced. That one's a good one. See that? It's pierced. A lot of these, yeah, look at that. You got bare metal contacts. So now you wrap this whole thing up with electrical tape and you have it all held together. Electrical tape's not a water barrier. You're still going to get water in there. You're going to get moisture in there. So now with all of these together, what's the one thing electricity really likes? Moisture. Moisture will cause the electricity to travel, excuse me, electricity to travel from one point to another. Even the slightest variation of current, if it goes from one end to another where it's not supposed to be, one circuit to another where it's not supposed to be, it's going to throw everything off, and the computer can even shut down the throttle body. So is that possibly what's happening? I don't know. I can't find anything else. The only other thing I could think of is the grounding situation on this truck. It doesn't seem like it only has one ground basically from the block to the frame. And I remember on older Fords there used to be issues with grounding, and we used to run a redundant ground basically from the block to the frame, from the frame to the body, and then even from the dashboard to the body. And that would cure a lot of issues. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a proper repair on this wiring harness, and I'm going to get this to where it's supposed to be, and hopefully that's the whole problem. I got a funny feeling it is. I can't guarantee it because I'm not experiencing the problem, but I have a funny feeling that this is what the actual problem is. So let me go ahead and let me get this fixed, let me get this done the right way, and we'll go from there. As I've shown you in the past, I like to use the butt connectors, the non-insulated butt connectors, and put heat shrink over it. I never solder anything. If you look at a vehicle's factory harness, nothing is soldered. There is no solder until you get into circuit boards and stuff like that. But in a regular wiring harness, everything is a crimp connect. There's no reason for solder. You can do it if you want, but I've seen solder create problems. I've seen solder create resistance issues. I've seen it cause check engine lights because somebody didn't know what they were doing. They did it incorrectly. They thought they knew what they were doing, but they didn't. But one thing I do want to show you is this. Now, I get these from online from Amazon, and I want to show you this real quick. So here's one of the ones that I use. As you can see, what it looks like. It has no seam in it. It's just like a little tube. Now, this one here, I've used these in the past, and they work. However, I want you to see this. Look at the difference in the thickness and the quality of the pieces. The thick one is the one that I get online, and that's the one I use. Now, when it crimps down onto a wire, obviously that's going to hold much better force on the wire. It ain't going nowhere. The one to your left, or at least I think it's on your left when you're seeing this video, the thinner one, that's the one that I get from Napa. Yes, they do work, and I've never had a problem with it, but I prefer the one on the right. It's just me being, anally retentive on stuff like this. I prefer it to be done the right way. So I'm going to go ahead and crimp these in place and use heat shrink. Like I said, whenever you're dealing with anything on the outside of the vehicle or something that's going to get humidity, moisture, anything like that you need to worry about, use heat shrink that has glue in it, because that keeps the moisture out. So that's what I'm going to do right now. And what I did do, just so you can see it real quick, is on here, when I cut those off, I cut it down really close to the actual connector part itself. So basically, I snip it right in here, and then I put a little heat on it and pull that heat shrink off. This way I don't have to shorten the wire up way too much. So I'll cut it like right there and right there, as you can see in that one. So let me go ahead and let me do that and get these all together. And there's one done, and basically now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the heat shrink over it like so, and heat shrink that in place. It'll be a nice clean repair once it's done. And now you don't have to worry about moisture getting in there. One other thing that I've noticed here with these, after I cut the connector out, if you look closely at this wire, you notice there's no glue here. If you look, where is it? Here. You can see a little bit of the glue coming out. So that's another reason I don't like these things. It took me no effort to get this piece here off of that wire. It took absolutely no effort. Like, it didn't even get glued on. So that, because usually I have to heat them up, and when you heat them up and you pull them off, the glue kind of stays stuck on there a little bit, and nothing's staying on there. So these are like the ultra cheap connector ends, and I actually think these are from GM, believe it or not. I think that's what they give you in the kit, but I don't like them. I never have liked them, and that's my reasoning behind it. They're not watertight. Whoever did the crimp on these, however, probably used this end here with that divot to crush it, which is what you're supposed to use on like the non-insulated, what I'm using. On these connectors here that are on this, those pink connectors, you're supposed to use this end. But even that, you're damaging this outer shield. So, you know, I don't know. I don't like them. I don't agree with them. I think they're cheap and cheesy. And I believe they cause problems. So let's just get this whole thing done. And there you have it. They're all done. They're all heat shrinked, all back together. I did one wire at a time, so this way I didn't, you know, lose place of anything, because, you know, all these wires being white, obviously you can mix them up pretty easy. So now I'm just going to tape that up, make it look nice once again, and plug this back in. I'm pretty confident that's probably going to be the problem. So let's get this all done and back together. And there you go, all back together. So I'm considering I can't find anything else, I'm kind of confident that that might be the problem. I actually am thinking about it. I may run a separate ground from the block to the frame, and then from the cab to the frame, just to be on the safe side. I think I'm going to do that. I think I'm going to make that up right now. And there you have it. I ran a redundant ground, one here from the cylinder head, and it comes over here to the frame. And then on this side, I ran another one from the frame down here, and I have it coming up into the cab itself. The nice thing about having your own junkyard basically is, you know, I save stuff like that. Whenever I disassemble cars, I actually save whatever cables are good, you know, especially ones that have double eyelets and stuff like that, because I always find they come in handy for something. So now I know that the ground situation is done. You know, I don't have to worry about that. But I got a funny feeling that wiring harness repair to the throttle body, I think that's going to solve that issue. So I think, yeah, so I think let's start this thing up now and see how it runs. Of course, as far as I know, it always ran fine. The real test is going to be when, you know, it gets wet or whatever. I mean, I guess I can take it over to the side of the building and hose it down. But I think I'm going to take it for a road test. If you're ever working on one of these things, with a flip nose type vehicle, or even if you're working on like a dump truck, they always have like some kind of a safety to keep it from coming down on you. Because you get cut in half. You don't want that to happen, obviously. But like this, it's got a safety pin that locks it in place there, and that actually started to come out. I didn't realize that. I must have just knocked it out because I did have it all the way in before. That's how it's supposed to be. But that's a double safety, because it does have a latch right there to lock it. So, just something to keep in mind. But then again, on this, see that? Like, it's not going to just come down. It's actually, the way the weight is in the cab, it keeps it from just dropping. So, I'm going to move this. Let's do the other hand. Then pull the cab down, but even still, see this? Like it wants to tilt forward on this. So on this, it's not that much of a concern. I guess if you had the dash and stuff out of it, or windshield out of it, then it would really offset the weight balances. Latching in place. That latch can actually use, it's like almost like a secondary latch for your hood. That could use a little lube. Maybe I'll do that. Maybe I'll lube that up. But yeah, I already cleared the codes out before. So I'm going to take this thing for a road test, and then maybe when I come back I'll spray it down. The preliminary road test was good. I mean, but then again, you know, it never really had an issue when it was dry. But I just wanted to make sure that the wiring was all good. Preliminary road test, everything is fine. So now I'm over where the water hose is. I'm going to flip the cab up. I'm going to spray everything down and just see how it goes. I'm going to let it cool off for a few seconds first. I don't want it to be blazing hot and then spray cold water on the motor. That don't work out well. So let me do that. Just so you can see that I'm going to spray everything down. And you can see the steam coming off. Like I said, I did get the motor hot. I let it sit for a few minutes, let it cool down a little bit. Got tranny wiring down there. I don't think it's going to have any effect, but figure what the heck. Now, if this doesn't, in fact, still have an issue, and now, whoa, hold on, sprayer. If it does still have an issue, then what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to start spraying stuff down individual areas till I can locate where am I having a problem. But let's start up and see what happens. Okay, so it starts right up. I did lube up everything up here like I said I would. So this all moves nice and free now. So let me let this back down and let me take it for another road test. Alright, so I just went on a pretty good little road test there, about 6 miles, and everything seems fine. You know, there's no issues. I still got my scanner hooked up. I haven't checked for codes yet. Let's look for code. No codes. Alright. And now I did exactly what the customer said they did and what they've been doing to get it to fail. You know, they've been washing the motor down, and every time they do, they have a problem. Every single time they do, they have a problem. And it's not something that they do on a daily basis. It's just when they wind up in an area where there's a lot of mud and stuff, or you know, if they're using a lot of wood chippers or stuff like that, then you know, he likes to clean the thing off and get the debris off of it, which I totally get. So I'm going to say that this is a success. I think it's fixed. So that just goes to show you how electricity travels, and it can create problems that you would never think can happen. I've had it to where a wiring harness one time it didn't cut the harness, but the harness was pressed up against the cylinder head in the back, in the sheath and everything else. Excuse me. In the sheath and everything else, and it passed by the right side cylinder head, and it was pushed up against it so hard, like it was just, you know, dead up against it. And once the motor heated up and everything was hot and it hot soaked the harness, the thing would actually set throttle body codes like this. It would set throttle body codes and throttle pedal codes. And what I wound up doing was, because I thought that's what it was, I wasn't sure. It took me a while to figure that out. And what happened was, like I said, it would heat soak through the wires, so now the wires would, you know, the electricity or the signal or whatever would actually pass from one wire to the next. And it would throw the computer off. Computer was like, you know, what the hell am I seeing here? And it would shut the thing down. What I wound up doing was I took a rubber hose, like an old radiator hose, and I actually wrapped the wiring harness in that, and I undid it from its retainers and stuff and moved it away from the cylinder head. And at that point, I took it for several road tests. I could take it on one particular road test, and every time I took it on this road test, when I got to a certain point, sure enough, the problem would happen. After I did that, the problem didn't happen. I drove the thing for several days. Nothing happened. I called Chrysler. It was a Hemi Ram 1500. I called Chrysler and told them what I eventually found, and they were kind of dumbfounded that it was actually happening. I said, well, it's fixed. So what they wound up doing was they sent me a new harness. They told me just replace the harness, and I had to send that other harness back to engineering so they could look at it and see. But it's the only thing that makes any sense. I opened it up. I looked at the harness. I looked at every individual wire. There was no cuts, no nothing. And the only thing I'd come up with, and the only thing they could agree with, is that it was heat soaking through the wires, and because it was heat soaking through the wires, it was actually the signal or whatever was, you know, jumping from one wire to the next. So let me just go down the street real quick to the shop. But I'm going to call it a day on this one. I'm going to say it's fixed. Now, the reason I didn't go down my little road that I always go down is because the gentleman that owns this truck, his shop is right on that little road there. So I don't want to go down his road and him, you know, staring at me, trying to figure out what I'm doing. So I figured I'd just stop at the rec center that's right down the street from our shop. I mean, the shop is literally just down the road here. So. And see that? It runs absolutely perfect. And you saw me, I soaked down that harness. So no issues. All right, let me get it in here. Let me put the phone down. There we are, parked. All right, so I'm gonna call it a success. So if you guys get anything out of my video, hit that like button. If you could, please subscribe. That's it. Have a great day. Keep wrenching.